The email arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. No subject line. Just a calendar invite for 4 p.m. with Director James Mitchell's name attached. I stared at my screen, watching the cursor blink in the project timeline I'd been updating. My team was 3 weeks ahead of schedule on the Aurora Tech integration platform. We'd been pulling 16-hour days, surviving on coffee and the kind of adrenaline that comes from solving impossible problems. "Chloe, you coming?" Aiden knocked on my cubicle wall. I minimized the spreadsheet. "Where?" "Conference room B, emergency meeting." The walk felt endless. 23 steps I'd counted 100 times before, but today each one felt like walking toward an execution. Mitchell stood at the head of the table, his gray suit wrinkled, his expression unreadable. "Effective immediately, I'm reassigning the integration project to Robert Hartley's division." My stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" "The project needs stronger leadership. More decisive management." His eyes met mine briefly, then darted away. "You're not leadership material, Chloe." The words hit like ice water. Around the table, my team, Aiden, Melissa, Jake, stared at their hands. 3 years of late nights. 3 years of covering for Mitchell's budget overruns and missed deadlines. 3 years of making him look competent. "This is my project," I said quietly. "Was your project?" "Robert will take over transition effective tomorrow morning." I simply nodded. Walking back to my desk, everything felt surreal. The fluorescent lights buzzed too loud. Keyboards clicked like machine guns. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began documenting everything. Every process. Every password. Every shortcut and workaround my team had developed. If they wanted Robert Hartley to take over, they'd get exactly what they asked for, nothing more, nothing less. That night, I sat in my Honda Accord in the Aurora Tech parking lot for 47 minutes, engine off, watching the building empty. The sodium lights cast everything in orange, making the glass facade look like it was on fire. 3 years ago, I'd started as a junior developer, grateful for the opportunity. Fresh out of graduate school, drowning in student loans, desperate to prove myself. Mitchell had seemed like a mentor then, gruff but fair, demanding but supportive. He'd given me the integration project when it was just a concept, a desperate attempt to modernize Aurora Tech's legacy systems before our competitors buried us. I'd worked 18-hour days for months. Weekends disappeared. I'd missed my sister's wedding shower, my nephew's first birthday, countless dinners with friends who eventually stopped calling. My apartment became a pit stop between office sessions. Takeout containers and energy drink cans multiplied like evidence of my dedication. The team I'd built wasn't just colleagues, they were soldiers. Aiden, fresh from MIT, brilliant with algorithms but hopeless with people until I taught him to communicate. Melissa, a database wizard who could optimize queries in her sleep. Jake, whose user interface designs were art. We'd become a machine, anticipating each other's moves, covering each other's weaknesses. My mother called every Sunday, her voice careful. "Are you taking care of yourself, honey?" She never said what we both knew, that I looked exhausted, that my clothes hung loose, that the spark in my eyes had dimmed. She'd raised me to work hard, to never give up, to prove that being a woman in tech meant being twice as good for half the recognition. I delivered that proof daily. While Mitchell took credit in board meetings, I was debugging code at 2 a.m. While he played golf with executives, I was explaining complex technical concepts to frustrated stakeholders. While he collected bonuses, I was managing the emotional labor of keeping my team motivated through impossible deadlines. The integration project wasn't just software, it was my masterpiece. Every line of code represented a problem solved, an obstacle overcome. The system could process data 40% faster than our legacy architecture. It would save Aurora Tech millions annually and position us to compete with industry giants. Now Robert Hartley would get the credit. Hartley, who'd never written a line of code, who spent meetings checking his phone, who referred to developers as the technical people with barely concealed disdain. He'd stumbled upward through corporate politics while I'd built actual value. I started the engine and drove home, already planning. The transition meeting lasted 4 hours. Robert Hartley sat at the head of the conference table, nodding sagely while I walked him through 3 years of work. His questions revealed the depth of his ignorance. "So this database thing, it talks to the server thing automatically?" I kept my expression neutral. The automated synchronization protocols ensure data consistency across distributed systems. Right. Good. And how long does that take? Currently optimized to sub-second latency for standard operations. He wrote nothing down. Behind him, Mitchell looked satisfied, arms crossed like he'd solved a problem instead of creating one. I documented everything meticulously. Every process, every dependency, every potential failure point. But I documented it exactly as requested, literally, with no interpretation, no context, no wisdom gained through experience. Technical specifications without the tribal knowledge that made them functional. The system requires daily maintenance protocols, I explained, sliding a thick binder across the table. How daily? Hartley frowned. Every day. Without exception. The log files need rotation, the cache requires clearing, and the integration queues must be monitored for overflow conditions. I didn't mention that I'd automated most of these tasks through custom scripts. I didn't explain that the complex maintenance protocols were actually simple procedures I'd streamlined over months. I gave him exactly what he asked for, the documentation, not the intelligence. Over the following weeks, I watched from my reassigned desk in quality assurance. Hartley's team struggled with basic operations. They followed my documentation literally, spending hours on tasks that should take minutes. They called vendor support for issues I could resolve in my sleep. I said nothing. When they asked questions, I directed them to the documentation. When systems failed, I reminded them that I was no longer responsible for the integration project. I became invisible, helpful only when directly requested, offering no unsolicited wisdom. Meanwhile, I studied. I learned Aurora Tech's organizational structure with new eyes, mapping relationships, identifying pressure points. I observed who really made decisions, who controlled budgets, who had influence. I cataloged Mitchell's management style, his blind spots, his dependencies. I began building new relationships. Coffee conversations with frustrated developers. Lunch meetings with overwhelmed project managers. Casual chats with executives who rarely interacted with technical staff. I listened more than I spoke, collected information like puzzle pieces. The picture that emerged was clear: Aurora Tech's leadership was more fragile than it appeared. Their success depended on technical competence they didn't understand, managed by people who'd inherited rather than built their positions. Remove the right support structures, and the whole edifice would collapse. I started making small changes. Nothing dramatic, nothing traceable. I simply began withdrawing the invisible labor that kept things running smoothly. 6 weeks after the reassignment, the first cracks appeared. Hartley's team missed their first deadline by 3 days. The integration with Aurora Tech's client portal failed during peak usage hours, crashing the entire customer-facing system for 6 hours. I watched from QA as Hartley sweated through a crisis call with our biggest client, promising fixes he didn't understand for problems he couldn't diagnose. Chloe, Mitchell appeared at my desk. We need your help with the integration issue. I'm not assigned to that project anymore, I replied, not looking up from my quality assurance reports. This is urgent. The client is threatening to terminate their contract. Have you tried following the documentation? It's quite comprehensive. His jaw tightened. The documentation isn't helping. We need someone who understands the system architecture. Robert Hartley is the project lead. I'm sure he'll figure it out. That weekend, they called me 17 times. I let every call go to voicemail while I organized my evidence files and refined my timeline. By Monday, they'd resolved the crisis by rolling back to legacy systems, effectively undoing months of integration work. The client stayed, barely, after multiple apology calls from Aurora Tech's CEO. I started phase 2. The beauty of complex technical systems is their interconnectedness. Change one component, and ripple effects spread throughout the architecture. I began making subtle modifications to shared libraries, updating documentation to reflect improved procedures, and reorganizing file structures for better efficiency. Each change was individually reasonable, properly documented, and technically sound. Collectively, they created a web of dependencies that only someone with deep system knowledge could navigate. Hartley's team spent entire days troubleshooting problems that hadn't existed before. They'd fix one issue only to discover 3 new ones. Their development velocity slowed to a crawl as they fought fires instead of building features. I volunteered for cross-departmental projects, positioning myself as a helpful QA analyst eager to contribute. I gained access to other systems, other codebases, other teams. I learned about Aurora Tech's broader technical infrastructure and its vulnerabilities. The marketing automation system depended on manual data exports from the integration platform. The financial reporting tools assumed specific database schemas that Hartley's team kept modifying. The customer support software required API endpoints that were documented in my personal notes, not the official specification. I began teaching other teams about best practices and industry standards that happened to be incompatible with Hartley's implementation choices. I shared articles about security vulnerabilities that happened to exist in the libraries his team preferred. I raised concerns about compliance issues that happened to affect their architectural decisions. Each intervention was helpful, professional, and completely plausible. I was just a conscientious employee looking out for Aurora Tech's best interests. The integration project, once 3 weeks ahead of schedule, fell 2 months behind. Hartley started working weekends, his confident demeanor replaced by panic. He hired expensive consultants who produced reports confirming that the system was unnecessarily complex and poorly documented. Mitchell's quarterly review meeting was scheduled for the third Friday of November. I'd been counting down the days. The email arrived at 8:23 a.m. on Thursday, November 18, subject line, urgent, system failure, all hands meeting. I arrived at conference room A to find chaos. Hartley paced near the windows, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in urgent whispers. Mitchell sat at the head of the table, face red, tie loosened. Around them, developers and managers clustered in worried groups. The integration platform crashed overnight, announced Sarah Kim, Aurora Tech CTO. We've lost connection to 15 major clients. Financial systems are offline. Customer support can't access account information. Hartley ended his call. The consultant says it could take days to restore full functionality. Maybe weeks. Days? Mitchell's voice cracked. We have the Morrison Group presentation tomorrow. They're deciding on a $5 million contract. I'm trying everything, Hartley said. But the system architecture is complicated. I sat in the back, taking notes. Around me, whispered conversations revealed the scope of the disaster. The overnight failure had triggered cascade failures across Aurora Tech's infrastructure. Systems that had worked flawlessly for years suddenly couldn't communicate with each other. What about Chloe? Someone suggested. She built the original system. All eyes turned to me. I looked up from my notebook, expression carefully neutral. I'm happy to help where I can, I said. But I'd need to review the current architecture first. It's been significantly modified since my transition off the project. Mitchell practically lunged across the table. How long would that take? Well, I'd need to understand what changes were made, why they were made, and how they interact with the broader system architecture. I paused, pretending to calculate. Given the complexity, probably a week just for assessment. A week? Hartley exploded. We need solutions now. I understand the urgency, I replied calmly. But systematic problems require systematic solutions. Rushing could make things worse. The meeting devolved into arguments. Hartley blamed inadequate documentation. Mitchell blamed insufficient resources. Sarah Kim blamed unclear communication between teams. Everyone blamed everyone else. Over the next 48 hours, Aurora Tech imploded. The Morrison Group walked away after their presentation demonstrated a completely non-functional system. 3 other major clients suspended their contracts pending resolution. Customer support fielded hundreds of angry calls about missing data and system outages. By Friday afternoon, emergency board meetings were happening behind closed doors. By Monday, the consultants Hartley had hired presented their final report. The integration platform was salvageable, but required complete architectural overhaul under experienced technical leadership. Tuesday morning, Mitchell stormed into the office, tie crooked, eyes wild. Why is no one meeting deadlines? He yelled to no one in particular. How did this happen? 3 months ago everything was working. I watched from my QA desk as he ranted at Hartley, at Sarah Kim, at anyone within shouting distance. His carefully constructed reputation as a competent leader crumbled in real time. Board members who'd trusted his management suddenly saw him as he really was, a politician who'd been taking credit for other people's work. The announcement came Thursday. James Mitchell was being transitioned to new opportunities outside Aurora Tech. Robert Hartley would be pursuing challenges better suited to his skill set. The integration project would be restructured under proven technical leadership. Sarah Kim appeared at my desk that afternoon. "Chloe, we need to talk." The corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My new nameplate read Director of Systems Architecture, and beneath it, in smaller letters, Integration Platform Division. 6 weeks after Aurora Tech's technical meltdown, the company had stabilized. The Morrison Group had renewed their interest after a flawless demonstration of the restored integration platform. Other clients had returned once system reliability was guaranteed. Customer support no longer fielded crisis calls every day. I'd rebuilt my team carefully. Aiden, Melissa, and Jake had returned immediately, grateful to work under competent leadership again. I'd added 3 new developers, each one selected for technical skill and collaborative mindset rather than political connections. My first executive decision had been simple: implement the automated maintenance protocols I'd developed years earlier. Tasks that had taken Hartley's team hours now completed automatically overnight. The complex system had become elegant through proper engineering. The second decision was more strategic: complete transparency in all technical documentation. Every process was explained not just in terms of what to do, but why it mattered and how it connected to broader business objectives. I'd learned that withholding knowledge was powerful, but sharing it properly was transformative. Mitchell's replacement, Director Amanda Torres, had started the previous Monday. She'd scheduled one-on-one meetings with every team lead, asking thoughtful questions about technical challenges and resource needs. When she'd met with me, she'd listened to my suggestions and asked for written recommendations. "Your integration platform saved the company," she'd said. "I want to understand how we can better support technical innovation." I'd submitted a 10-page proposal outlining structural changes that would prevent future disasters, technical leadership development programs, cross-training initiatives, and documentation standards that preserved institutional knowledge. She'd approved everything and asked for implementation timelines. Now, sitting in my new office, I reviewed the quarterly metrics. System uptime, 99.97%. Client satisfaction, highest in company history. Team morale, improved across all technical divisions. Aurora Tech stock price had recovered and exceeded pre-crisis levels. My laptop chimed with a calendar reminder: 2 p.m., all-hands meeting. I closed my reports and headed to conference room A, the same room where I'd been reassigned 6 months earlier. The meeting was celebratory. Sarah Kim announced record quarterly revenues and praised the technical teams for their exceptional performance. She specifically mentioned the integration platform's role in securing major contracts and improving operational efficiency. "I want to particularly acknowledge Director Bryan and her team," Sarah said, nodding toward me. "Their technical excellence and leadership have been instrumental in Aurora Tech's success." Applause filled the room. I nodded acknowledgement, remembering another meeting in this same space where Mitchell had declared me not leadership material. Afterward, walking back to my office, I reflected on the path that had brought me here. The reassignment had been devastating, but it had also been illuminating. I'd learned that competence without political awareness was vulnerability. Technical skill without strategic thinking was insufficient. Building systems was important, but building sustainable organizations was transformational. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Saw the Aurora Tech article in the Business Journal. So proud of you, honey." I smiled, remembering her Sunday phone calls during the darkest period, her carefully worded concerns about my well-being. She'd raised me to work hard and never give up, but she'd also taught me that success wasn't just about individual achievement, it was about lifting others up and creating something larger than yourself. The integration platform hummed along, silenced by the sound of the ventilation at Aurora Tech's data centers, processing millions of transactions, enabling seamless customer experiences, generating revenue that supported hundreds of employees. It was still my masterpiece, but now it was also properly supported, properly documented, and properly valued. I'd won, but more importantly, Aurora Tech had won. Sometimes the best revenge is simply building something better and making sure it lasts. The elevator doors opened onto my floor, and I walked back to work.